On November 27, 2024, something extraordinary happened on Russian radio. A retired general sat down for what should have been a routine interview about military equipment and turned it into a bombshell confession that shook the Kremlin. Vladimir Chirkin, a man who once commanded Russia's entire ground forces, did something almost unheard of in Putin's Russia. He told the truth. Not the sanitized, propaganda-approved version that fills Russian airwaves every day, but the raw, devastating truth about why the Ukraine invasion was doomed from the very beginning. In a country where criticizing the war can land you behind bars for 15 years, where over 21,000 people faced penalties in 2022 alone for speaking against the conflict, Chirkin decided he wasn't going to play along anymore. What he revealed wasn't just embarrassing for the Kremlin, it was damning. Vladimir Chirkin isn't some random military commentator or low-level officer with an axe to grind. This man dedicated nearly 4 decades of his life to the Soviet and then Russian army, climbing the ranks through sheer experience and expertise. By 2012, he reached the pinnacle of his career as commander of Russian ground forces, one of the most powerful military positions in the entire country. Putin relieved him of that command in 2013, and Chirkin's story took a darker turn when he was later convicted of bribery and sentenced to a labor camp, though he was eventually exonerated. When someone with his credentials and insider knowledge speaks, people listen. That's what made his appearance on RBC Radio so explosive. The interview was supposed to be straightforward. RBC had invited Chirkin and another retired colonel to discuss Putin's recent announcement at a CSTO summit, where the Russian president had been boasting about how Russian weapons proved their effectiveness in combat. These types of interviews happen all the time on Russian state media. Military experts come on, praise the leadership, hype up the hardware, and reinforce whatever narrative the Kremlin wants pushed that week. Everyone follows the unwritten rules. You don't criticize Putin, you don't undermine the military, you certainly don't admit that the war is going terribly. But mere minutes into the conversation, Chirkin shattered every single one of those rules. "I believe Russia was once again not ready for the war," he stated bluntly. "Traditionally, the enemy was underestimated and our own forces were overestimated." The interviewer seemed stunned, later admitting he didn't expect such frankness. Ukrainian journalist Denis Kazansky captured the moment's significance perfectly, saying he had never seen criticism at such a high level before. In Putin's Russia, this kind of honesty is professional suicide at best, and a genuine threat to personal safety at worst. The government has tightened its grip on dissent dramatically since 2022, designating thousands of media outlets, activists, and public figures as foreign agents or terrorists. Speaking the truth about the war's failures isn't just taboo, it's dangerous. Yet Chirkin went ahead anyway, fully aware of what might happen to him. The question hanging over everything now is simple. If Russia's leadership got it so catastrophically wrong from day one, how exactly did they mess up this badly? Chirkin didn't mince words when describing Russia's fundamental errors. The Kremlin walked into Ukraine drunk on its own propaganda, convinced that overwhelming force would crush any resistance within days. Russian soldiers actually packed parade uniforms before crossing the border, genuinely believing they'd be marching triumphantly through Kyiv's streets within 72 hours. Everyone, as you remember, started saying on February 24th that the war would end in 3 days, Chirkin recalled. "We'll finish them off right away." This wasn't just overconfidence, it was delusion on a massive scale, and it came from somewhere specific. Chirkin pointed to what he called the Tbilisi Syndrome, referencing Russia's 2008 war with Georgia. That conflict lasted 5 days. Russian forces rolled into Georgian territory, occupied several regions, and faced minimal resistance. The Kremlin looked at that success and drew the worst possible lesson. Invasions are easy when you're Russia. If Georgia fell in 5 days, why would Ukraine, with its supposedly weak military and outdated Soviet equipment, take any longer? The logic seemed airtight on paper. Russia had the reputation as one of the world's premier military superpowers. It possessed massive armories full of tanks, missiles, artillery systems, and aircraft. Its defense budget dwarfed Ukraine's. By every conventional metric, this should have been a mismatch of epic proportions. Reality had other plans. By the end of 2024, Russia had lost 430,790 soldiers killed or wounded during that year alone. That's the equivalent of 36 motorized rifle divisions wiped out in just 12 months. The UK Ministry of Defense reported that casualty rates had been climbing steadily, with some days in December 2024 seeing 2,200 Russian soldiers killed or injured. Between February 2022 and May 2025, estimates suggest as many as 250,000 Russian fatalities. To put that in perspective, that's 5 times the number of all Soviet and Russian soldiers who died in every war since World War II combined. Equipment losses told an equally grim story. Thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, air defense systems, and artillery pieces have been destroyed, documented meticulously by open-source intelligence groups. And what did Russia gain for this staggering cost? In all of 2024, Russian forces captured 4,168 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. That's less than 1% of the country. It took 4 months to take Avdiivka, 2 months each for Selidov and Kurakove. These weren't strategic prizes. They were muddy fields and destroyed towns, seized at an unsustainable rate of loss. Chirkin also took a shot at former defense minister Sergei Shoigu, who famously claimed Russia pulled back from Kyiv as a gesture of goodwill. Chirkin made it clear that was nonsense. The Russian military scrambled to save face after realizing the capital wasn't falling into their hands like they'd planned. But arrogance alone doesn't explain how Russia got things so spectacularly wrong. The real culprit was feeding Putin false information, and Chirkin knew exactly who to blame. When Chirkin assessed Russia's intelligence services, he didn't hold back. "I would give all of Russia's intelligence services a poor rating," he declared. The state authorities essentially received false information that 70% of the Ukrainian population was on our side and 30% against. It turned out to be exactly the opposite. This wasn't a minor miscalculation. This was the foundation upon which the entire invasion strategy was built, and it was completely, utterly wrong. The Federal Security Service, or FSB, Russia's premier intelligence agency and successor to the Soviet KGB, had somehow managed to convince Putin that Ukrainians were waiting to be liberated, that they'd welcome Russian soldiers with open arms. The FSB didn't just get the numbers wrong, they built an entire fantasy scenario. Between 19 and 21, the FSB expanded its Ukraine-focused unit from 30 officers to 160, convinced that victory was inevitable. In the days before the invasion, FSB agents were busy arranging safe houses and accommodations in Kyiv, preparing for the wave of occupation personnel who'd need places to stay after the capital fell. They had plans ready to overthrow President Volodymyr Zelensky and install a puppet government loyal to Moscow. Everything was set up for a quick takeover. There was just one problem. None of it was based on reality. When Russian forces crossed the border, the reception wasn't what anyone expected. Ukrainian resistance was immediate and fierce. Russian prisoners of war captured in those early days expressed shock and anger. One officer told interrogators, "Frankly speaking, they tricked us. Everything we were told was a fake." Many soldiers admitted they thought they were participating in military exercises, not launching a full-scale invasion. They'd been told Ukrainians would greet them as heroes. Instead, they faced bullets and bombs. Former UK Defense Secretary Ben Wallace summed it up well. Putin believed Ukrainians would welcome him as a liberator because he was convinced Russians and Ukrainians were the same people, just waiting for Russia's president to free them. How did the FSB fail this badly? According to reports, the agency's Sergei Beseda, head of the 5th Service responsible for Ukraine intelligence, and his deputy were placed under house arrest in March 2022. Allegations surfaced that FSB officers had embezzled millions meant for building agent networks inside Ukraine, networks that either didn't exist or provided worthless information. The culture of fear within Russian intelligence meant analysts were terrified of telling Putin anything he didn't want to hear. So, they told him what he wanted, that Ukraine was weak, that the invasion would be easy, that victory was guaranteed. They created an echo chamber of lies, and Putin built his war strategy on quicksand. These intelligence failures set the stage for disaster, but Russia still had one more surprise coming. Ukraine itself refused to play the victim. For a brief moment, in early 2022, it looked like Russia's predictions might actually come true. Russian forces advanced rapidly from multiple directions, securing early victories in places like Bucha and Mariupol. At the invasion's peak, Russia controlled approximately 27% of Ukrainian territory. The four regions Putin wanted to annex, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, seemed within reach. If momentum had continued, Russia might have seized even more ground. Then Ukraine started fighting back, and everything changed. Fueled by determination to protect their homeland and sovereignty, Ukrainian forces proved far stronger and more resilient than anyone, including Russia, had anticipated. Civilians took up arms. The military adapted quickly, using strategy and grit to counter Russia's numerical advantages. By late 2022, Ukraine had retaken massive portions of the territory Russia initially captured, reducing Moscow's control to less than 20% of the country. That's largely where things have remained ever since. Russia continues to make advances along certain frontline areas, but progress is agonizingly slow and staggeringly expensive. The math is brutal for Russia. In 2024, they captured 0.69% of Ukraine while losing over 130,000 soldiers. They're trading lives for empty fields and ruined villages. The economic toll compounds the human cost. Russia faces a labor shortage of 1.5 million people because so many workers have been sent to fight. Russia has even brought in North Korean reinforcements, with President Zelensky claiming that Russian forces are executing these foreign troops to prevent their capture and the intelligence risks that would create. As Chirkin himself acknowledged, Russia learned a cruel lesson within the first week of fighting. The problem is, they kept paying that lesson's price for nearly 3 years now. Chirkin's confession revealed the depth of Russia's failures. And when someone like Chirkin shatters that illusion, it creates cracks in the foundation. Whether those cracks can widen into something larger depends on whether others find the same courage he did. One general telling the truth is remarkable. A chorus of them could change everything. What are your thoughts on General Chirkin's stunning revelations? Do you think more Russian officials will find the courage to speak out? Or will the Kremlin's grip on information remain unbreakable? Share your perspective in the comments below. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more detailed analysis of the stories that matter. Until next time, stay informed.